forest was barely waking when I started my run that morning. A thin layer of mist clung to the ground, drifting between the pines like slow-moving smoke. The rails ahead disappeared into a cool gray haze, and the only sounds were the low hum of the locomotive and the steady rhythm of steel under us. It was the kind of dawn that usually made the job feel easy, routine, predictable, almost peaceful. Evan climbed into the cab with a thermos in one hand and a half-zipped jacket. "Morning," he muttered, settling into the seat beside me. We'd worked enough runs together that neither of us felt the need to fill the silence. The first few miles passed quietly. A deer flashed across a clearing, a hawk circled overhead, and the engine pushed forward with familiar weight. I kept us at a steady speed, eyes shifting between the controls and the long stretch of track ahead. Nothing unusual, nothing demanding, just another early shift through the deep woods. But as we approached one of the longest straightaways on the route, a mile-long corridor of track framed by tall, shadowed trees, I noticed something dark on the horizon. At first, I thought it was just a stump or a boulder someone hadn't cleared. The mist made shapes look bigger than they were. Then it moved. Evan leaned forward. "You seeing that?" As the locomotive rolled closer, the shape took form. Broad shoulders, thick brown fur, a massive body standing upright on the rails. A bear, a full-grown one. I expected it to drop to all fours and bolt the second it heard us. Most animals did. Even moose backed away when they felt the vibration of a locomotive coming. But she didn't move. She stayed planted exactly where she stood, tall and unshaken, staring straight into the oncoming engine. I tapped the horn, short at first. Nothing. The fog trembled with the sound, but the bear didn't even twitch. I hit the horn again, longer this time. The echo rolled through the trees like thunder. Still no reaction. She didn't flinch, didn't back up, didn't turn away. She simply held her ground. "That's not normal," Evan said under his breath. He was right. Bears cross tracks every day out here, but they don't block trains. They don't stare down locomotives. The distance closed faster than my mind wanted it to. Instinct kicked in before fear had the chance to. I eased off the throttle, but we were too close, too heavy, too fast. I grabbed the brake handle. "Hang on." The emergency brakes screamed as they clamped down. The entire train lurched, the steel behind us rattling like a chain dragged across concrete. The force pushed us forward in our seats as the locomotive fought its own momentum. Still, she didn't move. The wheels shrieked against the rails, sparks flickering beneath us as the speed bled away. Evan gripped the console with both hands. I kept my eyes locked on the bear ahead, terrified she'd run at the last second and leave us no room to stop. But she didn't run. She lowered onto all fours and waited. The locomotive finally groaned into a full stop, barely a few yards from where she stood. The air inside the cab felt thin, charged, stretched tight, like a held breath. I exhaled slowly and looked through the front window. She looked back. Her posture wasn't aggressive. It wasn't panicked either. If anything, she seemed deliberate, purposeful, like she wasn't stuck or scared. She wanted us to stop. Evan whispered what I was already thinking. Why does it feel like she's warning us? For a long moment, neither of us moved. The locomotive hissed beneath us, metal cooling after the hard stop. The bear didn't flinch. She simply lowered her head slightly, still watching us with that strange, steady focus. Evan finally spoke. "Protocol says we wait. We don't leave the cab unless there's visible damage or a hazard." "Yeah," I answered, though I couldn't pull my eyes away from her. She wasn't acting like a hazard. She wasn't even acting wild. She looked determined. I pressed the horn again, giving her a sharp, echoing blast. She stepped back 3 slow paces, but stayed squarely on the rails. Evan frowned. "She's not trying to run. She's trying to keep us here." I didn't want to agree with something that made so little sense, but the thought hung in the air between us. Bears avoided trains. They didn't position themselves like sentries. I tried a second long horn. The sound rolled through the corridor of trees, scattering a cluster of birds into the fog. The bear shuffled backward again, calculated, unpanicked, and then stopped. "Look at her head," Evan said. "She keeps looking past us." He was right. Every few seconds, her attention flicked toward the stretch of track ahead. Not at us, not at the locomotive, somewhere beyond. That feeling from earlier tightened in my chest, a sense that this wasn't about us at all. I picked up the radio. "Dispatch, this is train 46. We've stopped due to a bear directly blocking the track. She's not moving off the line. Static, then Maria's voice. Is the animal injured? Negative. Behavior is unusual. She's holding position. A pause. You are authorized to observe from the cab. If she clears the track, proceed at reduced speed. Reduced speed wasn't what worried me. It was the idea of moving forward at all. The bear took another step back, then another. Then she turned slightly and began walking straight down the track, still ahead of us, still between us and whatever lay beyond. Is she leading us? Evan murmured. I couldn't answer. I eased the throttle just enough to bring the locomotive into a crawl. The train rolled forward with a soft clatter, slow enough that I could have walked beside it. The bear continued down the track, glancing back every few paces as if checking whether we were following. Fog drifted around her, and the forest grew quieter with each yard we covered. Then, without warning, she stiffened. Her ears perked. Her head turned sharply toward the trees. And in a sudden, explosive movement, she bolted off the tracks and vanished into the brush, swallowed by the pines. The rails ahead fell silent. I brought the locomotive to another gentle stop, listening. For a moment, all I heard was the low rumble of the engine and the distant drip of dew falling from branches. Then came the sound, a faint, irregular metallic crunch, like warped steel shifting under pressure. Not the clean ring of wheels on rails, not the creak of settling timber. Something ahead was moving, straining, alive in the worst possible way. Evan met my eyes, his voice barely above a whisper. That's not the track settling. Something's wrong up there. I eased the train to a full stop, keeping my hand on the brake lever a few seconds longer than necessary. The metallic groan ahead pulsed through the rails again, faint but unmistakable. Whatever it wasn't normal track noise. Evan leaned closer to the windshield, scanning the foggy stretch of rails. You're not going up there alone, he said before I could even suggest it. I grabbed my radio. Dispatch, train 46. We've halted again. There's structural noise on the line, and the animal has fled the area. Request permission to inspect the track on foot. Maria's voice came back sharper this time. You're already off schedule, Caleb. What exactly are you hearing? A bending metal signature. Could be a shift in the railed or support beams. Another long pause. Then, you're authorized for a short-range inspection. Stay within sight of the locomotive. Keep your radios open. Copy. Evan and I climbed down onto the ballast. The air felt colder on the ground, the fog thicker. The forest around us held its breath, listening. I could hear the subtle vibrations under my boots, soft, uneven, like something sagging under pressure. We walked slowly, each step deliberate. The mist thinned just enough to reveal the outline of the small bridge ahead. Nothing more than an old timber span over a narrow ravine. I'd crossed it hundreds of times without thinking. But now the structure looked wrong. The approach slope on the near side slumped unevenly, and a section of earth seemed darker, freshly disturbed. Then Evan stopped. Hear that? A faint, trembling sound drifted up through the ties. Not metal this time. Something alive. A thin, high-pitched whimper. We moved faster. At the edge of the bridge, I knelt and angled myself to look beneath the rails. The beam closest to us had twisted downward, the wood splintered from days of soaking rain. A metal bracket hung loose, pulling a section of track just enough to warp the alignment. And wedged in the narrow gap between two rotted timbers was a small, shaking body. A bear cub. Its front legs were pinned between the warped beams, formatted with dirt and moisture. Each time it tried to pull back, the metal scraped, producing the strained groan we'd heard from the cab. The cub let out another muffled cry, eyes wide with panic. Oh no, Evan breathed. Poor thing. My heart dropped. The mother hadn't been challenging us. She hadn't been confused or territorial. She'd been trying to stop us. If we had kept going, even at reduced speed, this weakened section would never have held. The locomotive would have cracked through the span and plunged into the ravine, and we would have crushed her cub along the way. I raised the radio. Dispatch, we've located the issue. The bridge support is compromised, major washout under the approach. A bear cub is trapped beneath the rail. The line is unsafe. Repeat, unsafe. The shift in Maria's voice was immediate. Understood. Shutting down traffic on your line. Emergency response and wildlife personnel are being dispatched. Hold your position. Copy. Evan's gaze drifted to the tree line. Caleb. I followed his eyes. There, Half concealed between the moss-covered trunks stood the mother bear. Her body swayed with anxious steps, pacing a few feet one way, then back again. Not growling, not threatening, just watching. Her ears twitched each time the cub cried. She took a tentative step forward, then stopped, torn between fear of us and fear for her young. "We're not here to hurt you," I said softly, knowing she couldn't understand the words but hoping she might recognize the tone. For a moment our eyes met, and in hers, I didn't see anger, not even wildness. I saw dread and hope, as if she was pleading with us to do what she couldn't. The cub whimpered again, a thin trembling sound that cut straight through the fog. Evan crouched near the edge of the bridge, keeping his voice low and steady, trying to soothe the small creature without getting too close. Every time it squirmed, the wood beneath it shifted with a warning creak. We couldn't risk touching anything until help arrived. Minutes felt like hours, but finally the distant rumble of engines broke through the silence. 2 vehicles emerged along the service path, one maintenance truck loaded with equipment, and a green-marked wildlife unit SUV. The team stepped out quickly, but without panic. They'd clearly handled worse. A tall ranger approached first. "Holt," he introduced himself briefly, already scanning the bridge. "Show me what you've got." We led him to the sagging span. He knelt, studied the warped beams, then leaned in to look at the cub. His brow tightened. "All right," he said. "We need space to work. First priority, keep the mother back." 2 wildlife officers moved toward the tree-line, carrying small cylindrical canisters. They tossed one a safe distance behind the bear. It crackled loudly, a sharp popping that echoed off the trees. The mother jerked in surprise but didn't run far, just circled wider, giving us room while keeping her eyes locked on the cub. Holt nodded. "Good. If she pushes in, we use a low-dose tranquilizer, but let's try to avoid that." He signaled the maintenance crew. They unloaded hydraulic jacks, support beams, and a compact floodlight. Evan and I helped set up the lighting so Holt could see down into the gap. The cub trembled as the beam touched it, but Holt murmured something calm and slow, his voice almost a rhythm. The first jack made contact with the weakened timber. The moment pressure was added, the entire bridge let out a groaning protest. Everyone froze. Holt watched the movement closely. Again, he instructed. "Slower." They turned the handle by millimeters. The wood rose just enough to stabilize. A second jack pressed against the opposite beam, anchoring the structure. Metal scraped, then held. Evan lay flat on his stomach, inching forward to reach the cub without disturbing the newly braced supports. I held his belt to keep him steady. He extended a hand carefully under the cub's chest. "Easy," he whispered. The cub tried to pull back, but its paw snagged on the twisted metal beneath it. Holt leaned in, using a gloved hand to nudge the bracket aside just a hair. "Now, Evan," he said. Evan lifted. The cub slid free. It gave a startled cry as he pulled it towards solid ground, its tiny body trembling violently. Holt immediately took it from Evan's arms and carried it to the wildlife SUV, where another officer checked it for injuries. The mother bear saw this. She stepped closer to the track, her body low, tense but not aggressive. Her eyes, dark, shining with fear and exhaustion, followed every movement. I met her gaze for just a moment. There was nothing wild or hostile in it, only a crushing worry for the helpless creature being carried away. "You did everything you could," I said under my breath. Holt returned after securing the cub. "Minor swelling, no fractures. Lucky little guy." He gestured to the maintenance crew. "Close the line. Full repair." They began unloading more equipment, marking the area with bright flags. The official shutdown order crackled through my radio a minute later. I stepped back onto the gravel, feeling the weight of the day settle into my chest. The forest was quiet now, no metallic strain, no frantic cries. Just the wind moving softly through the pines. Evan stood beside me. "You think she understands we helped?" I watched the bear watching the SUV where her cub rested. "I think she understands we tried," I said. And for now, that was enough. 2 weeks passed before the line reopened. Long enough for the bridge crew to rebuild the compromised span, reinforce the washed-out slope, and install new monitoring sensors that could detect even the smallest shift in pressure. When I arrived at the depot that morning, a printed report waited on my locker, the stack of stapled pages looking far heavier than paper should. The technical summary was blunt, almost cold in its wording. The structural supports had been on the verge of total collapse. Heavy rainfall had eroded the foundation for weeks, maybe months, and the span had degraded far faster than anyone realized. The next fully loaded locomotive to cross, ours, would not have made it. The report didn't bother softening the conclusion. It simply stated the statistical probability of a derailment, and reading it made the back of my neck tighten. I stood there longer than I meant to, staring at the final line. Failure imminent, if unaddressed. I didn't need the document to tell me how close we had come, but seeing it laid out in black and white forced the truth to settle deeper, anchoring itself in a place I couldn't brush aside. Evan stepped up beside me, peering over my shoulder. "Well, guess we weren't imagining things," he muttered. He tried to sound casual, but the strain in his voice gave him away. Before we headed out, my phone buzzed. A message from Holt. "Cub doing well. Minor swelling only. Mother healthy. Both moved deeper into reserve this morning." Another message followed with 2 photos. The first was a blurry shot of the cub resting inside a padded crate, its eyes alert despite everything. The second showed the mother standing a few yards away behind a thin veil of trees. She looked exhausted, but steady, like someone who had survived something too big to explain. "You ready?" Evan asked as we walked toward the locomotive. I nodded, though the motion felt slower than usual. It wasn't fear that held me back, just a quiet awareness that the routine I'd taken for granted had shifted. We rolled out of the yard just as the sun lifted above the pines. The forest glowed gold for a moment before settling into its usual muted greens. Everything looked the same: towering trunks, damp earth, and thin bands of mist. But I couldn't unsee what lay beneath the surface of these woods now. As we approached the rebuilt bridge, my hand eased the throttle back on instinct. The locomotive slowed to a careful glide. The new beams shone pale and fresh under the morning light, the bolts aligned in perfect rows. Workers had left fresh gravel mounded at the shoulders, and the monitoring sensor blinked a calm, steady green. Evan shot me a sideways look. "Caleb, it's reinforced now." "I know," I said, and I did, but I still watched every inch of track as we passed. We crossed without a sound, not even the usual hollow thunk of wood beneath steel. Still, a part of me kept waiting to see a familiar silhouette in the trees. The forest seemed emptier without her. The rest of the run unfolded without incident. No unexpected noises, no animals darting across the rails, no trace of fog clinging to the ground. By the time we pulled into the depot that evening, the stiffness in my shoulders had softened, though it didn't disappear entirely. Inside, a handful of older engineers lounged around the break table. One of them pointed at me with a grin. "So you're the guy whose train got saved by a bear." Another chimed in, laughing. "You should give her a radio. Maybe she can dispatch better than headquarters." The group erupted into laughter, and Evan elbowed me lightly. "Relax, man. They're just messing around." I forced a smile, letting the jokes pass over me, but they didn't land the way they used to. Not because they were wrong, because humor couldn't dilute the reality. That bear had saved us. Not by planning, not by reason, but by something deeper: instinct, desperation, and a mother's refusal to let danger swallow her young. When the depot finally emptied, I stepped outside into the cooling evening. The sun dipped low, stretching long shadows across the quiet rails. I stood there for a while, listening to the soft whisper of wind moving through the treetops and the faint ticking of the cooling locomotive. I thought about the mother bear disappearing deeper into the reserve with her cub. I would never see her again. That was how it should be. Wild things deserve to stay wild. But from that day on, whenever I rounded a bend and spotted something on the tracks, a deer frozen in the headlights, a fox darting away, even a fallen branch, I didn't feel the familiar frustration of delay. Instead, I felt a pause, a moment to look closer, a moment to remember, because sometimes the warning comes long before the danger, and sometimes it comes from the one creature you'd least expect. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss new stories. And now just click the playlist or the next video on your screen.